So how do we respond to this? I mean, is this a fair point? I guess the first point to make is that it's true that CBT doesn't talk about God or the Logos. So it's true that it drops that kind of Stoic metaphysics. And I mean, the obvious reason is, I mean, first of all, if it did talk about God or the Logos, it would never get public funding because of the Western principle of the separation of church and state. This is why Alcoholics Anonymous has never got serious funding, and when it has got public funding, it's led to court cases because Alcoholics Anonymous talks about a higher power, and that, you know, so governments can't finance that because it goes against the separation of church and state. Secondly, the reason that governments have picked up on CBT is because it presents itself as very much evidence-backed. You know, that's why politicians feel secure in giving it financing. And where's the evidence for the Logos or for God? I mean, you know, you can't kind of, and as soon as, if you did talk about God and the Logos, you'd immediately alienate everyone who's not a believer. You know what I mean? So it would, if they did talk about God and the Logos, if they did try and incorporate Stoic metaphysics, they would just be a very marginal, tiny, they would never have reached the number of people that they've reached. But I want to take issue with the idea that CBT doesn't teach virtue, that it just teaches what this author called, you know, an unexamined notion of feeling good. I don't think that's true. I think it does teach moral strengths and virtues. Okay, so first of all, CBT totally requires, for it to work, it relies on you living an examined life. That's what it's about. The first step of it is becoming aware of how your beliefs and opinions and thoughts lead to your emotions. You know, and using things like a journal to become aware of how your habitual thoughts cause your emotions. So, I mean, it's totally about, you know, it's called the Socratic method. It's very much inspired by Socrates' injunction to know thyself. So it's very much about cultivating self-awareness and self-knowledge. That's the first thing. Secondly, it's very much about taking responsibility. Albert Ellis said, the happiest day of your life is when you stop blaming your parents or the economy or your government or the environment or the New York Yankees for your mental state, but you take responsibility for your thoughts and emotions. So that is very much in there, you know, this idea that it's not about the past, not about what happened to you or other people do to you. You've got to take responsibility for how you think and how you behave, which is quite different from psychoanalysis, by the way. Thirdly, it's very much about facing your fears and getting out of your comfort zone. It's about, you know, it takes kind of courage to recover from mental illness. You know, it's about really kind of doing something when your whole body is telling you not to. And confronting these fears that are kind of somatic and powerful. So it takes guts, and I think you know, that's kind of a moral thing. So it involves that kind of not just lying down and talking about things, but getting up, going out there, practicing in real life situations. And that was kind of the spirit of the Stoics, and that's very much the spirit of CBT as well. And you know, it's about it encourages discipline and the idea of working to get better. Ellis was asked, who does cognitive therapy work best with? And he said it works best with people who are willing to work their asses off. Yeah, and that's true as well. It's about you get out what you put in. You can't just take a prescription to the pharmacy. You can't just lie there and be hypnotized and wait to get better. You've got to work at it. There's no easier way out of it. You've got to work at it. So I think that, you know, it never talks about virtue, and I think that's in some ways a good thing, because I think when you talk about virtue and bang on about virtue, there's a danger you sound like a kind of, you know, Republican senator who's secretly got a drug addiction or something. But I mean, you know, but it raises, in some ways, it is kind of going back to this idea in ancient philosophy that the path to virtue is also the path to happiness. That true happiness, secure happiness, is the same as virtue and morality. But then, I mean, that's a troubling idea to our modern minds, because does that mean that mental illness is vice? If mental health is virtue, does that mean that mental illness is vice? I mean, would you say that an alcoholic is morally failing Would you say that someone with depression is morally failing? Would you say that a schizophrenic is morally failing? These are not easy kind of statements to make. I mean, I had social anxiety in my early 20s for about 6 years. Social anxiety is an emotional disorder where you get very worried about what other people are thinking about you and how they're judging you. Now, was that a moral failing? I suppose in some ways it kind of was. I was too worried about what other people thought about me. I mean, that's kind of a moral failing in some ways. But it would have been very unhelpful if I'd gone to a therapist and they said, well, you know, this is a sin, this is a vice, you know, you're morally weak. I mean, that's just not really kind of, wouldn't have been helpful. But at the same time, what was kind of helpful was when I encountered the idea that in some ways I was causing this, that it was my own thoughts that was causing me this suffering, and that I could exert control over them, I could take responsibility for them. So that was kind of helpful to me getting better. So these are not easy kind of questions. I mean, we know now that a lot of our mental state is inherited. It comes from our genes, or it comes from our childhood. Yes, I mean, Freud was right. A lot of our mental state does come from how our parents treated us, from our circumstances. We don't have a complete blank slate. We don't have complete free will. But we do have a very limited ability to steer and to reprogram ourselves and to play the cards that we happen to have been dealt. So it's this. I want to just end with this idea of Stoicism as teaching you how to steer, you know, teaching you how to navigate. They said that you know, philosophy would teach you to be teach you to become kybernetes, which means steersman. You know, and this is where the word cybernetics comes from, by the way. So it's teaching you how to steer, how to navigate. And I was thinking about this last night on the way back from the lovely dinner that Eric and Amiel provided for us. And John was very kindly driving me and Joe back. And I was navigating. I had the directions, and I was a little bit tipsy. And we set off with great confidence that I knew the way back. And within about 2 minutes, I was very confident. And within about 2 minutes, we were like, "Yeah, I don't really recognise this at all. This doesn't look familiar." And it reminded me of these great lines from Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. It's in the first tales, the Knight's Tale. And there are these lines: "We fare as he that's drunken as a mouse. A drunk man knows right well he has a house, but he knows not the right way leading thither. And a drunk man is sure to slip and slither, and certainly in this world so fare we. We furiously pursue felicity, yet we often go wrong before we die." And as we were driving along, Joe had this great little machine, this magic machine, that kind of showed us that we'd taken a wrong turn, and he even spoke to us and said, "Turn round and keep left." So it's GPS, right? Well, I think in some ways that's kind of what Stoicism did and what it can still do. It can help us navigate. It's like a GPS system. It can help us just drive and avoid obstacles, and even show us the way home. What do I mean by that? I mean, like, it can show us back to our true selves, or our best selves. So there's lots of things I haven't discussed, which we can discuss now, maybe in questions and answers. I mean, what I haven't really discussed is the idea of whether governments have a right to tell people how to pursue happiness, and all the kind of issues there. You know, whether they can say, "Look, you should follow this path to happiness. Here's all the evidence proving it." Does that give them the right to tell everyone? But we can discuss that among ourselves. But I'll end there.
Great, thank you.